Okay, so it might have just kicked there.
Yeah, there's something not. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, anything like that.
I'm glad to be home after all that sea time.
Yeah.
And I wish it took a little bit longer, so we had more time to spend in certain locations for a couple of days.
We've got a friend that's gonna let us have their house for like 10 days. So yeah, and they're off to Galapagos Islands. So
Which one do you want?
we just get them down to mansion.
Sounds all right.
Yes, it would be this one first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What town's that in?
So it did
It's up in the hills outside of Monterey.
take us off of here for a minute,
All right.
so people will jump back on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood's in
See.
there.
Oh, yeah, one of those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Point Zoom is back up for.
Last time we were there, I took a picture of his house and better construction.
Yeah, I thought we were already signed up, so I exited out of it and it canceled the whole thing. And the audio is, all this is set up.
Oh, good.
Are good to go. And I'll just get, yeah, when you're done with the mouse, oh, let me get my, sorry, my chargers.
Yeah, our kids are getting together.
The white cord.
Yes, all the time.
Mhm.
We haven't had that forever.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, we have that, we'll be there for.
Okay, people are getting back on. And then
Oh, good.
Jose are there.
Super recognize it.
So, and if you want, again, that to go smaller, you would just
Do that.
Okay.
And Vanessa is with us, is in the house.
In the house.
So while people are getting back on, and hi, Jose and Annette. I just wanted to say that next Tuesday, Tom has prepared this amazing matrix that will go over all of the notices, and there are over 50 of them. And so we're going to just start going over, and it'll be mostly, how do I use this matrix form? Because it will be listed by what notice do I need to give? It will be listed by the form number. And then was there a third way that you had that?
Yeah, there's two form numbers. One is your contract form you're working with, and the other one is the number of the actual form for the notice.
Okay, so if you
And then I
didn't.
have one by topics, it's sorted by topic.
Okay, so topics and then by form numbers. And if you're working with like a form 21 or like a 35, that's the easier one, then it will give you all the notices that go with that form. Yes. Anyways, it is a favorite. So there were a couple of things that came up this last week that I just want to talk about real quick. And one of them is modification of a closing date. If you see here, the words on or before, and I just want to go over this very quickly. It's very confusing. Can you imagine if a seller needed every single day, but a buyer thought they were going to be able to get in there a week early? And it just sets it up for a lawsuit. On or before by Annie has our legal hotline has said, don't ever use that. It creates ambiguity. Attorneys love ambiguity. They love duplication, or they love two different places, same topic in your contract, but yet they're not the same. So that is an example of what I see a lot. And then the next one is,
There's a hotline on that one in that phone.
yeah. and then here's the hotline. This questioner that the broker sent in, I am continuing to get pushback on from agents when I request the removal of on or sooner or on or before verbiage from the Northwest MLS forms. I have some concede and say, okay, we understand it cannot be on Form 21, but is it okay to put it on a 22Y? So we don't have to keep executing a new 22Y if the date changes. My understanding is that the verbiage is not to be added to any Northwest MLS form, period. Is that correct? Also, in one of our classes, a real estate attorney had said that by adding verbiage, we are actually crossing the line of our license. And that's the key right there. We have a limited capacity as a broker to act as an attorney. When I first heard that, scared the living daylights right out of me, because we're held to the standard of an attorney. So we can fill in forms, but by putting in on or before or sooner, then we're going beyond what we can do that our license allows us to do. So her answer, brokers are practicing law even when they complete blanks of statewide forms. Washington Supreme Court allowed brokers to engage in that limited practice of law in the Cultum versus Heritage House case, but explained that when brokers practice law in this way, they will be held to the standard of care of a lawyer. A lawyer would know that the language adds nothing of value to the contract. The parties can also agree to close sooner than the closing day, but neither party can be forced to close sooner. And so if you have one, let's say today is the 28th. Let's say we're going to have a closing date of next Friday, which would be the 9th. And if we put this in here, if on Tuesday, everything with the loan has been approved, the money, all the documents are signed and everything, and it works out for escrow that they can close, say on Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday of next week, then you do real quick a 22Y. Takes about less than 5 minutes to create. You know, people sign it, send it to the other broker, and then you have a what I like to call a date specific. The language adds no value, but it does add confusion. And let's see what else. The broker is held to the standard of care of a lawyer with respect to drafting of the purchase and sale, and broker adheres to that standard by refusing inclusion of those words on Form 21 or a subsequent Form 22Y. So if you have somebody that you're working with that you're saying, our office, our best practice is that we don't have that in our contracts, and you have any pushback on it, this is a great thing to send. And Annie often talks about it. Okay, and then the last thing in the notes that will be sent out is that this particular thing right here, let's see if I have it up. This gives you the YouTube site for Annie when she talks about that.
Yeah, it's good video.
So, sorry.
No, that's what we need.
So if it says on or before, the contract can be voidable without it for the buyer or the
If you
seller?
had some hard-nosed attorney on there
Mhm.
that got involved in your real estate transaction, yes.
Cause I've done that before.
I know.
I have put or sooner.
I know. And don't I usually send you a note?
Yeah, I know you do.
But I'm telling you right now, we do not want that included in our contracts. Now, if it's mutual and it's in there, we're not going to come back and say, I want you to sign a new form, you know, but just realize when they do that, you are diminishing and you're opening yourself up for liability. Any other questions on that? Tom, thank you for putting that together for me. Okay, so the next quick one, if I can be quick about it. I thought this one was interesting. This is and/or signs. Have you seen where somebody has put a person's name in the buyers, and the second part is and/or signs? And when I include that in a contract, it is because they've told me we're going to form an LLC. And so the the seller knows who the buyer is, but it is going to be an LLC that's going to be created to be able to put that in. Question, are there negative consequences to using the verbiage and/or signs? Answer. When the buyer and seller agree that the buyer's name includes and/or signs on a statewide form purchase agreement, buyer and seller also agree the buyer may assign the buyer's interest in the purchase agreement to any other buyer prior to closing without seller's additional consent. So that's where if you have somebody that goes through and they get mutual and then they assign it to somebody else, you just need to be really sure when you say and you write out and/or signs that you know what that buyer is going to do.
If that seller has a neighbor that they do not like and do not want them to buy their property, and somebody puts an and/or signs, and he thinks it's selling to that person, then they assign it to the neighbor to buy it. That's a condition where the seller has no control, and now that person can buy that property, but you'll have a very unhappy seller. You'll let them do that. So I mean, so there's consequences to that. I would, if that's going to happen, and the intent is that people want to put their home into an LLC so they don't have personal property, there's no reason why a Form 34 couldn't be used to state that the and/or sign is going to be the same parties but creating an LLC. Then they can't turn around and just give it to Joe Blow down the street. Another example that was in there is that what if you have an owner finance, and so the seller thinks that that buyer is well qualified, they're going to give an owner financing loan, and then the and/or signs ends up to be somebody they don't know if they're qualified to make the payments on the loan that they're now in, and they can't get out of the deal because they don't need to have permission to do it. It's in the and/or signs. Now they have an unqualified buyer buying the property. So there's risks involved, especially if there's not a commercial owner or a regular finance loan. If it's an owner finance, then it's really a risk for the seller.
Most of the cases I've seen closing, it was a straw buyer.
What kind of buyer did you say?
Straw buyer.
That would be where if you really wanted the property, but you burned your bridges with the people that own it, you come to me and you say, would you write up an offer on this? And would you get there and put and/or signs?
He asked me to make an offer and put in and/or signs. Then during the process, I thought it was.
You could,
Yeah, it's quite common.
Yes.
To see this happen, I think. I mean,
It's like, oh, your buddy sees a property in Wenatchee, it's really hot, and wants to buy it right now. Oh, have him go buy it and assign it to me, you know.
You said
I
that
can't be there.
create people that aren't qualified to buy. Because well,
Especially, yeah, okay, so the conversation here was especially on a seller finance. You get somebody in there that you think, and and if you as a broker don't know, it's not that you can be held liable for it, but it's just, it isn't good.
That's
practice.
be pretty mad at the broker and then that goes to him.
Yeah.
To let them have that deal go to the person they didn't want to have that property.
So,
get a bad reputation, kind of doing stuff.
yeah, so the last little tidbit right here is if a PSA is assigned by a buyer to an assignee, the form to use in making that assignment is Form 32. I've never used that. I've never seen it. And so we need to make sure that we put that in our matrix. Mr.
Yeah, usually they just use a regular Form 34.
Yeah, yeah, but that now they're saying Form 32. Okay, so now I'm curious. So let's see if I can find it quickly. Or not. There we go. Okay, so let's go down and let's look at it. Wow. Okay, so Form 32, assignment of buyer's interest. There it is right there. And this is what it looks like. You notice this right here, this Form 32 is going to be tied back to the contract. The assignment of buyer's interest is made by, and then you fill that out. I just want to look here real quick. 32, it does not have a manual. So if you get to it and you have issues, let me know. And we'll go through it and make sure that it's signed. I would assume that the very top of this is going to be like your purchase and sale from your buyers to your sellers. And then here is the date of it.
At the bottom, does the seller have to sign it?
Signee initials.
Only the assignment.
Yeah.
It only needs to be signed by the buyer. You notice that's what I want to point out.
Yeah.
The seller doesn't have to sign it.
Yeah. Okay. So,
And that makes it a notice.
all right. I'm gonna leave that up there. Where's my little jobber doer? Oh, and the last little thing is
And handout.
in handouts. Okay. How many of you have seen love letters sent with a offer? I see it about maybe 20% of the time, maybe 25% of the time. And so we just want to look at this real quick. I have two questions related to love letters. I noticed the broker material remarks of a listing a request for no love letters, but was surprised to read such communication would not be presented with any offer. This was what was in the additional broker remarks. Buyer letters to sellers not accepted and will not be presented with any offer. Can an agent or a broker decide on what should not be deemed as a part of an offer? What is our duties to our client? What is one of the main things that all offers are what?
Delivered,
Presented and delivered, yeah.
Right.
So if somebody does give us a love letter, then we do have to present it, but we need to be able to say, I really recommend that you not read it, or you send me an email that you don't want to see it. And then you're covered.
What's a love, like, are you guys talking about an actual, like?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
There's an example.
Trying to get emotionally attached by writing something like, hey, I'm so and so, and I really could use this property for my family because it's perfect for us.
Like, kind of convince them, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's one. Oh, wait, no, let me go to, okay. So here's one with, so first of all, why are love letters not good? What can they violate?
Creates bias.
Yes,
Or how did that?
the Fair Housing Act. And it creates a bias. So right away, we can see, what if you hate cats?
He's looking right at you too.
Yeah. So here's dear seller.
Interracial marriage, and so if you have somebody, all of a sudden they become biased, I don't want those people buying my house.
Yeah.
Now you have a legal.
Oh dear, we left their name in there, honey, but that's
Where?
okay. At the very bottom.
Oh, whoops. That's fine.
Your name's Jack and Jill?
I think Tom put that in there. But that's what it looks like. A lot of times it, and they're, well, this was an example
That
of a
is the
lot.
actual offer that letter was attached to.
Okay, so one of the things that happens is that if, let's say they read that letter, they love this couple, they're gonna start a family, this is a family home. And so there are 3 or 4 offers and they choose these people because of this love letter. So what happens to somebody else if they find out about it or they don't get chosen? So what you're doing is just opening up your liability to your seller. I see where in a lot of emails where the brokers give love letters to the sellers, where they say this is a young couple and they have 2 little kids and they love this house and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it is from one broker to another, it's really crazy. Okay, so let me put this up here.
It's more professional than I have.
So what did you say, saying, are you take if they present it with a love letter, you take the love letter off and present the offer?
We have to, by law, the question was, do you take it off? By law, we have to, if it's something is presented, we have to present it. But that doesn't mean that the seller has to read it.
What about as the buyer agent, if your buyers tell you, if they want to write something up and you attach it to their offer?
You can't, the thing is that the Fair Housing Act is written to protect buyers. So the buyers, it doesn't bother at
So
all.
it doesn't, so you have to attach it to the contract and send it?
They direct you to do it.
If they ask you to do it?
So if you, haven't represented a lot of buyers, I just represent sellers. So if you have a buyer and they want to write a letter, then you can say, you can just explain to him, due to the Fair Housing Act. And then there's another handout here, you can even show them, that says from our state attorney for realtors, that it really opens a door for somebody to put a claim against them that they violated fair housing. And fair housing is a pretty big deal if they follow it through.
I have had some buyers that are kind of pushy like that. They've told me like, write a letter, but I've never done it, you know?
Yeah.
I was just, seemed weird to me. I've never heard of it before. I'm new.
Yeah.
Well, there's some things that'll be good here for you for handouts, because a lot of the things we have here are to be sent to the other broker to help educate them if they have a problem. In other words, these hotlines are very handy for that. So they're saying, I think we're talking about this. And we send it to them, we say, why don't you read it, we'll talk about it. You read it. Because you really are trying to make a relationship with the other broker, because they're the ones that are educating the client.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was the actual purchase and sale agreement that it was included in it. And these love letters was between 2 brokers in our office. So,
Even makes it more risky.
Yeah.
yeah. So, let me see. So you just included
I included the full offer, but again, there's some things with this offer that stood out while we're going through it is, why is the buyer filling out something that is, say, to the seller's best knowledge, this is an area that the seller fills out, not the buyer. So the buyer broker filled it in.
I left that blank once and a listing agent told me like, you have to fill that out. I thought it's
That's to be filled out by, to the seller, best of the seller's knowledge, seller represents. That's not
Oh,
a
yeah,
buyer,
that
okay?
does it.
I mean, it's just have to read it.
Yeah.
yeah. And let's see.
There's a couple other things.
This was a 22D, and our best practice for 22D to always check number 1, square footage, you always do that. And then there are 2 phrases here. One of them is the buyer acknowledges that they have received and read, and it will change after the first of the year, the Washington State pamphlet, and then in bold,
Agency law.
the law of real estate agency. And then the second one is Form 17. Seller agrees to, what,
Provide a seller Form 17.
okay,
within
seller,
5 days of
seller
issuance.
shall provide Form 17 seller disclosure within 5 days.
And if it's in the supplements, do we change that?
That's not
verbiage?
delivered.
That's not what.
So it,
You're representing the buyer, right?
Yeah,
By state law, the seller has to fill out and deliver within 5 days of mutual to the buyer a Form 17.
so it doesn't matter if it's already signed and filled out on the supplement.
If they don't deliver that within 5 days by state law, the buyer then can get out of that deal all the way up to the day of closing.
You're supposed to physically give it to you, even though it's posted, right?
You can deliver it by email to the other broker, that's delivery. Because then that broker is required by state law to deliver that time to the seller. But what I'm getting at is your fiduciary responsibility is to protect your buyer. If you turn around and have them sign a Form 17, you just gave away all of their rights. You're trying to protect them. Why would you do that? See where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
Okay. It also says it has to be complete. I'm gonna show what this will look like. We'll see what I'm saying.
okay. So then they had, this offer had a well, agreement,
Okay.
attorney review, septic, and a title. For every residential offer, the best practices are that you have a 22D with the square footage, and then those two phrases on page 2. You have an RA, a T, and a VV for homeowners insurance. And let's see, do they have one? No, they don't have a VV. So here's their inspection. And what Tom is pointing out here is if we fill in the number of days, you need to make sure the inspector that you have is going to be able to respond so that they have time to go out and inspect it, get the report, and then you go from there. Now, if you need additional inspection, say like between the house and the sewer line, they want to scope that out. Which, by the way, in the meeting this morning, did you hear about that inspector that does that for free?
Yeah.
We
But
need
the thing
to,
is if you call up a plumber or an electrician, how long does it take you to get them on the calendar? If you call one up today.
Usually 3 or 4 weeks.
I live in a small town.
Yeah.
But it's a little faster, but still takes a little while.
yeah,
And so when you put that 5 days in there automatically, which is what this broker did, we didn't have any consideration for how fast can I get someone in there? I put more than 3 days in there. It might take me a week to get this.
Just trying to rush those,
So I
rush the whole.
just like put in 10 days and then said 3 days.
so you see right here, if seller agrees to make repairs, then repairs shall be accomplished at the seller's expense in a commercially reasonable manner in accordance with the applicable laws, no fewer than 3 days prior to closing. The point here is maybe we should have it a little more, like 5 days or 7 days or
I
something.
wanna have my inspector.
Because if you have to have your inspector go back and inspect it, then,
So I'm just saying, you have to think about these blanks and don't,
okay,
so they fill that in.
yes. So that part of it was well done.
So who fills that in, the seller or the buyer?
Well, that's another one. This is actually a form that was developed by the state. It's a state statute. It's a law. It's not a real estate contract. And it's something that is to provide by the seller supposed to, but the law was written wishy-washy so that either broker could do it.
Yeah, because
But
they never
if
fill
you
it.
don't fill this in correctly and give it to your escrow officer, the escrow officer uses this in order to contact and make sure there's no liens or unpaid bills prior to closing. That's the escrow officer's job. That's what they're supposed to do. But if you don't give them the information,
Yeah.
then now you're creating a problem that, after closing a month later, they send a bill to the new person that phone, you're going, hey, wait a second. They didn't get paid, they're gonna get mad. Now they have to pay something that should have been paid at closing.
So
If the seller or the seller broker doesn't fill it out, then the buyer broker should. But by best practice, when you're making a listing and you're sitting down with the seller, fill it out right there so that it's all done. Then it's something that is very easy to take care of. But
And
something
then you
the seller
just-
should know at the
then
time
you
of
just
the listing.
upload it up here without the date and the buyer's name, and you put it in your associated docs if it's your listing. That makes it really
Makes it
easy.
easier for them to use that.
Yeah.
but To build good practice.
All right. This is the Form 17 that was attached, included into the contract. It's not a part of the contract. It changes the liability if somebody sues from where you can recover, your attorney fees are covered. I mean, it just really gives it really opens up unnecessarily liability. Let me see, right here. The following are disclosures made by the seller and are not the representation of any real estate license or other party. This information is for disclosure only and is not intended to be a part of any written agreement between the buyer and the seller.
This should not be a part of any contract. Don't ever attach it.
I probably see it on at least 70% of the
70%,
contracts that come across my desk.
Now, as I went through this offer and looking at it,
You wanna see them too, right? In a different attachment, or do you not, does
they
it?
just sent it under a separate email, it's simple as that.
So if you,
Yeah, you guys would like to take a look at it, but just.
Well,
not
yeah.
the contract.
that's right, when it's in the contract, the only thing I look at is it fully signed. And are there any blanks? And if I come across something, then I might send you back a note when I do an evaluation of your contract, I might say, Form 17 is not complete. If you're the buyer broker, please make note that there are several like asterisk yes answers with no explanation on page 5. I don't do the in-depth like when you put it into command and I put my compliance hat on, then it's pretty
Yeah.
pretty strict. Okay, so here are asterisk yes answers. So there's 2, there's 4, 5, 6, 7. And this is really when you get into structure and environmental, especially, it's really bad if they're not explained. Here's another one. Let me see. Okay, so see like these right here. Are there any defects? And so then they have here, the garbage disposal and the dishwasher.
And then he has it checked.
And they-
They're not applicable. But anyway.
Okay, so after all of that, we get down here, they've signed it, and then there are no extra.
No explanation.
So,
And the buyer signed this and attached it to the proposal. Now,
and they
there.
signed that they received it.
that buyer should be able to get out of that deal all the way up to closing if they wanted to.
Even though they signed that first line.
Not anymore, they signed that line.
And included it.
So if you don't
Buyer broker,
sign it at all.
until it's delivered to you within 5 days of mutual. Then you have your buyer sign they received.
Yeah, cause I go through it with them, but we always sign it, and there has been some times that it's been missing some stuff. But
Yeah. And when you put that into command and if it's missing stuff
yeah, I've had it.
and
returned,
it's
so-
close to your closing date, the sooner after you have a document that's fully signed and ready to put into command, the sooner that you can get that in there, then the more time you have to correct any mistakes. And then that way, it's not like, oh my God, closing is Friday and they're not responding. I asked for
So if we
forms.
don't have it signed, we can get back out of the deal and get the earnest money back?
Okay,
There's two ways.
so the first way is, first of all, it needs to be delivered. And there is a notice that you can terminate the contract if it wasn't delivered within a time, within the 5 days of mutual. There's also this one where it says the buyer waives the right to revoke the offer. I'm seeing a lot of people sign both lines on here, and so then it's a done deal.
Yeah.
Form 17 is off. There's no protection for the buyer. And so that's why we really harp on this. Even though it's in the associated docs and you download it and you share it with your buyer, even if you do that, you still want the other broker to deliver it, email it to you.
Yeah, cause I've done that, and they've been like, it's in the supplements.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's not delivered.
say, you need to send it
It's
to
not
me,
delivered.
because so we can start the 5 days. Can you even say that?
If you wanted to.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Or just not say anything.
I'm just not saying.
Just say anything.
Yeah.
Unless you know.
Yeah, if they're,
More protective to your buyer if you don't say anything.
Yeah.
That's correct. Who's your obligation if you're representing the buyer under your license? You have a fiduciary responsibility to protect their rights.
Yeah.
Why give their rights away?
Yeah.
That's giving their rights away.
yeah.
So I don't agree on. I try to protect my buyer.
So here's
So
an,
there's two things. One of them is if it's not delivered within the 5 days, that doesn't meet statute.
yeah,
The other thing in statute says it must be a completed form.
yes,
And that's not complete because they did not fill in the asterisk answers. Or if they miss it, any of the check boxes coming down.
they're blank.
Not complete. And the thing is that there's a notice form that's assigned by the buyer that sends that in, and that can terminate the contract by filling out a notice form, okay? And then you have a release of retainage form that accompanies that, but those two things make this a very dangerous form for sellers. And the seller brokers, if they're not really paying attention and working for their clients' interests. This is not a real estate form, this is a state statute. And this is probably the most lawsuit, precedent case topic. I think there's more lawsuits over Form 17 than any other thing.
I'm just overlooking it.
It is, it's sloppy. It's just sloppy that people are not paying attention and reading the law and reading the form and then protecting their client.
So let's,
It's a lazy broker that
Yes.
doesn't really know where the risks are for their client to protect them.
so let's just say that they never sent you the Form 17. So in command, they're asking for that signed form. So if they don't do that and you're going to use this to get out of a transaction, then you can just put a note in there that to date, the listing broker has not sent the Form 17 and you've requested a couple of times. If you do that, then you're not going to get dinged because the document isn't in there, even though it was in associated docs.
Marcia, let's talk best practice for the seller. Okay, I'm a seller broker
Okay.
and I have a seller. I say you must fill out this form completely. I can't tell you how to fill it out, but I will check it to make sure you checked all the boxes. It's a requirement. It's thoroughly completely filled out. Okay. Now I can remove the signature page and upload it into the associated docs. And that way nobody can sign it. And then after I have mutual, I'll send it to the buyer broker for delivery within the 5 days. So for standard of practice, that if you want to put it in associated docs, go ahead, but just leave off that signature page, and that way you can keep it clean all the way up, and I can protect myself.
And another thing that I like to do on mine is I ask them, I'm going to send you your seller disclosure. Would you just review everything and make sure that it's up to date? And then on your signature, page 5, you can just reinitial it, redate it, and then we know, and you can put up to date. That way it protects the seller.
Yeah.
Yes, but when you get that back from your your listing from the seller, you need to check it right away. Nothing worse than you're 2 days away. You've uploaded in command. Command says, no, it's not complete. The other broker didn't say anything. And now you've got to go back to your seller who's in the midst of, getting everything ready to get to vacate. Anyways, Form 17 is not a part of your contract.
It's a dangerous one.
FERPTA Form 22E is not a part of the contract. However, if it is property and you need to have documentation that one, at this address, they either are or they're not a non-resident alien. That's a double negative. I hate that. So if you've got a tax ID number, then you click that I'm not. Does that make sense? But if you have a tax ID number, you can do that. If you don't, and how they can buy a home without having one, I don't know. And
Yeah, that's a deliverable. Should be another separate email. It's purchase and sale.
yeah.
And not as a supplement.
Oh, you just blocked out the address.
What's that?
From the attached documents, they usually attach the 22. The sellers.
The seller?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just something, it's just it's the filled out 22K, 22 fully signed 22J, the FERPTA. Those are all things that are deliverable. They need to be filled out and delivered, and then they're sent to escrow.
Okay, there's a whole bunch of.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so here is another document that is not a part of the contract, and I see this a lot. And I think that's it, isn't it?
After that, but then the love letter.
Yeah,
So this,
okay. Any more questions on that?
so that form for the, it's a great tool for the brokers. There you go.
That one right there.
Yeah, this is a great form to have, to show that anybody that would have education about this, but you as a broker, if you get tangled up in this, you may be losing your, insurance won't be covered.
Okay, do you know what that means?
I don't know what I've seen the E&O.
Professional liability insurance.
And that's because that's to show if they're asking you to write a love letter or show.
That's what this whole thing's written about, is that do not give love letters out, because right there, there's HUD testers, and they go around and they'll walk into a real estate office and they'll go through and they'll be looking for files for anything that shows any kind of racism or any kind of favoritism that makes it unfair. That's what this Fair Housing Act is all about. So they have HUD cops that if they come in and they find a love letter in that contract file, there's up to a $50,000 discrimination practice fine.
And if your E&O doesn't cover it, if you don't have E&O insurance, what Tom and I did, and I think it's about $125 a year. We bought over all of our insurance, protecting all of our office equipment and vehicles and stuff like that. We got an umbrella of $1 million that will cover things like this.
But we have E&O insurance with Keller Williams too, right?
Yes, Russ carries it for the entire office.
Yeah.
And so that's why when we recommend that you not include them, that's one of the reasons. And if it gets to a point where his E&O insurance says they won't do it, guess who has to pay for that? For the attorney and if you get sued. Yeah, it falls on the broker. So it's just important. And
Marcia, this nice little paragraph there says the problem right there. It said love letters often contain personal information about the buyer and reveal characteristics such as race, religion, or familiar status, which could then be used knowingly or throughout unconscious bias and is unlawful bias for the sellers to decision to accept or reject an offer. So you open this up and it's a can of worms that opens up by attaching that love letter.
And I have seen broker to broker, I have seen where they violated this a lot. And because you're an independent business owner and you're under our umbrella, all we can do is recommend. And if we recommend and then you continue to do it, well, then you're liable. And that takes us out of the picture. Consider these best practice. Educate your client about fair housing laws and the pitfalls of the buyer's love letters. Inform your clients you will not deliver buyer love letters, and advise them that no buyer love letters will be accepted as part of the MLS listing.
Well, person's up here.
Oh,
I kind of leave that to drive away.
and do you want me to just put this back on your desk?
Oh, you could just leave it there.
Okay,
I
perfect.
trust nobody can steal it because we have great people.
That's right. So, remind your clients their decision to accept or reject an offer should be based objectively on the offer itself, all by itself. If your clients insist on writing a buyer love letter, do not help your client draft or deliver it. Now that's interesting, or deliver it. Avoid reading any love letter drafted or received by your client. Document all offers received and the seller's objective reason for accepting or rejecting an offer. That's something that we really don't do, is we don't document if there's multiple offers, why a seller agreed to one or the other. Usually it's pretty apparent, like an all cash above list price is pretty hard to fast close. The bottom line is that real estate professionals should not recommend buyers write love letters, and remind sellers that offers should be based and evaluated on their own merit. So, good information. Yeah. Okay. And then there's also where she talks about it, a YouTube, and how and explains it much more fantastically than I ever could. Okay, so right now we're thank you, Tom, for putting that together for me. Let me go back over here. I wanted to remind you that this new oh, come on. That this new document is effective January 1. And if you've not read it and you understand it, remember before 7, 8 pages long and it was blah, 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 and RCW, blah, blah, you know, that this is much better, much more concise. But in the meantime, you can use for your buyers, you can use this document and there's no restriction on it. And it's just 1 page. And it just gives you good information about the agency law changes that are happening and why it's important that you have a buyer's agreement. So this is available to use at any time.
Those are only in English, huh?
I don't know that.
Give a call, go to a
Yeah,
seminar.
I'll call.
Yeah.
I would assume that they would have it at least in Spanish. Yeah.
Because when Hispanic folks are real worried of signing things too, like,
Oh,
are you gonna charge me something? Like, no, I'm not gonna charge you anything, I'm just.
Yeah, the contrary, I was in Mexico this last year and we're like, hey, what if we bought some property down here? And I was like, I don't know if I trust the process, not.
Yeah, so you can understand if it's.
And our first,
Yeah.
trust area, this is not there.
So the last thing, and then, I'll save the hotline questions, a couple of them for sure, for next week. But, this is the last of the forms. These have already been changed. So notice of low appraisal, this is the new document where the buyer gives, the appraised value is less or is conditional on the completion of a work order. So that is one of the new forms that they created this year. And then the seller's response to low appraisal. They can modify the closing. They can, in a reduction of price. They can go and get their own appraisal if they want to do that. Propose to reduce the price, maybe, a little bit or whatever, or reject of the low appraisal or work orders. And this was last August or July. This was the work orders was the new thing that came out. And then always on a notice, there's not on all of them, but there's a place to respond. You're going to tell the seller tells you, and then are we terminating? Are we waiving the contingency? Or are we going with the accepted or reduced purchase price, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's one of the new ones from July. Here's a notice of a work order. And when you have a work order, they'll be very clear about what that is, and you can include that work order with this notice. If you have something that requires, let's say you flush the toilet and you notice that in the backyard there's a puddle that appears. Okay, so you have to get maybe a contractor's bid, and on that it is okay to be able to include that with it. And then this work order, because of the appraiser, then allows for the work to be completed, and it also, without penalty, you can to change the closing date to accommodate that. And let's see, the next notice was a 22 RN, a well inspection response. This looks just like part 1, part 2, and part 3 of your inspection, only it's specifically to, I went too far, your well. I don't think I've ever seen this used because they've always used a 22R and not the RN. Another new one is sewer inspection.